Hi everyone, my name is Bushra Salama, and I'll be taking you through the evolution of my very rudimentary vocabulary app, which is part of a project for the UX Immersion course for Career Foundry. So before I got started with the project, I did a bunch of competitive analysis on applications like WordUp, Magoosh, Vocabulary Builder, and Duolingo. And initially I wasn't exactly sure what sort of language learning application I wanted to make. So I tried to get a lay of the land and talk to some of my peers to see what they thought of these applications, to see if their thoughts corroborated mine. And what I came up with was that there was potentially a gap in the space for youngish professionals in the 30-year-old age range who weren't getting what they needed from applications like Duolingo. And the first step in that process was kind of creating a persona that reflected, that demographic. And that's where we have Jessica Hernandez. So Jessica is our protagonist in this story, and she is the definition of the American dream. So she's hardworking, self-sufficient, resourceful, very practical person who's really ambitious, and she's worked her way up the corporate career ladder. So her consulting firm has recently promoted her into a senior position. It's a new challenge for her, and everybody's watching, and it's really essential for her to be successful. So as part of this position, they require her to travel internationally, and they're kind of relying on some of her fluency in her native tongue to handle the language barrier, but she doesn't really speak that frequently anymore and really does need to sharpen up. So there's a situation where she has some proficiency, but applications like Duolingo are just not cutting it because they're a little bit silly, a little bit childish. The phrases that you have to practice with are a little unrealistic. They're not business-centric, and they're just a little bit, they're just really not doing the job. So she needs an effective, structured application. It's not all about cute games and things like that. She just does really need to sharpen up in the most efficient possible way. And full-on coursework is too time-consuming. She can't, spend a lot of time otherwise. So there are a couple of challenges that we're trying to solve for this particular persona. One is to avoid unnecessary cognitive load. The app should be very clean and focused. It should be simple, easy to navigate. With WordUp, which was actually a great application in terms of the content and the underlying technology, it was very unfocused, very cluttered, and it was really difficult to actually get the value out of the application. So the time to value is a little bit too high. The other thing is she just has to be able to practice at an appropriate real-world level. It's kind of important to be able to read business white papers effectively, be able to speak effectively with potential clients, things of that nature. Third thing is we want to be able to reinforce and motivate learning with metrics and a spaced error review. So professionals like Jessica are going to be probably extrinsically motivated when it comes to this sort of thing. So having the metrics that allow them to propel themselves forward and really get a sense of where their mastery levels are at is going to be really important. And then there's just this is sort of a fourth thing that I thought would be appropriate given what I'm trying to accomplish with this application. But just having a plan Z in her back pocket for real-time assistance in case there is a gap in understanding. So just having an interpreting feature as a contingency plan. So we have a few quotes here on the left. She doesn't have a lot of time. She can't spend it figuring out how to use the application. She needs exercises that test and work her brain in different ways so that she knows that she's really learning the words. So, flashcards are important, but flashcards are also not going to be the end-all be-all. She's going to want to have a way to practice her interpretation skills so that she knows whether she's actually comprehending the meat of the material that she's going to be interacting with. All right, so early in the design process, so I'm actually a solutions architect, and this isn't really, user flows are definitely just kind of a new area for me. And I started off with just drawing a bunch of squares and hoping for the best. And it was chaotic and messy, and kind of the first iteration of these flows was not that great. I cleaned them up, and so I'm sort of in the crawling phase, which you're seeing here. And we got some kind of initial design flows set up. And from there, I kind of reflected that in a few rudimentary sketches, which I then put into Marvel for testing. So I wanted to create the application that took the best aspects of WordUp and the simplicity of Magoosh, while also just kind of scrubbing away and simplifying a lot of the clutter that I was seeing in some of these applications. So yeah, very chaotic at first. I really was just sort of drawing boxes that were ultimately meaningless. Like, I don't actually know what these pie charts meant. I just sort of slapped them on there and figured, I'll address these later. And then I tested them out with some users. And I got some pretty good feedback. Some of it was consistent, and then there was a few people who said things that, were not quite on the mark, in my opinion. But nearly everybody found that it was intuitive to navigate, well organized, and uncluttered. And that was, I think I was on the money when it came to making sure that the application was clean and structured. Nobody was ever confused about where anything was or what they had to push in order to get to the area of the application that they needed to be at. And I got a few pieces of feedback around the flows for the association flashcards, and creating a new deck, where there was maybe a little bit of clarity that was needed. So I did get some good stuff around. Maybe you can add options for anytime you make an error in one of the games, you should be able to quickly add that error into a flashcard. And I thought that was actually pretty good feedback. What did seem to be missing, what a lot of people found confusing, was the translation game, which isn't shown here, but there was a lot of room to clarify the functionality, and it was a little bit confusing for people. They didn't actually understand what they were supposed to be doing. And one person said it would actually seem like it would require a lot of natural language processing and like crazy AI capabilities. So that was an interesting piece of feedback. A design constraint that is actually more of an engineering constraint, something to consider. I think there's a little bit more work to be done around the metrics and the review functionality in particular. So what I was thinking with the review functionality, which I didn't have time to fully build out, was that any errors that were made in some X amount of time would be represented in random order for the user to focus on the areas of weakness. So I thought having that just kind of as an option for users on the home screen would be pretty good, but I wasn't sure exactly how to structure that. So that's definitely part of the next steps and improvements, along with just maybe rethinking areas of redundancy in the game and deck sections. Do we need all of those games? Can we consolidate some of them? Can we clarify some of them for maximum efficiency? Rethink clarity around the translation game. How can I present that in a way that users find intuitive? Because right now there are a lot of questions. And consider maybe including a learning section with contextual media. So one of the things that I really liked about the WordUp application was their flashcards weren't just, the word and the definition and, a sample sentence. They included a lot of articles, movie clips, quotes from famous people that embedded the word in several different contexts so that the user could understand in a variety of different ways what that word actually meant in a social setting, which is ultimately how we use language. So I thought that was really a really powerful aspect of that particular application, and I'd like to find a way to potentially include it in my own. And then from here, just continue to digitize. I forewent the kind of learning all of the, the technologies like, Sketch and others, just so that I could focus on the content of the actual design. So I did a lot of things by hand or on my paper tablet, but I think the next steps would I probably have to dip my toes into the technological aspect. So kind of overall learnings, I think probably a lot of people, and millennials in particular my age, perfectionism is definitely a thing that we have to contend with. But the design process is it's perfectionism really is the enemy of the UX design process. So I really like that I was sort of forced to start with chaos and messiness, because that would just sort of quickly get me over that. Another thing is just user feedback is of paramount importance. So I do have a pretty strong ability to put myself into multiple different shoes, but empathy isn't sufficient. After a while, what you're working with, you stop seeing what it is that you're actually making. So having a fresh set of eyes, taking a look at it and pointing things out that you would never even consider is extremely valuable. And kind of along those lines, iteration is your friend. Just do it early and do it often. And then lastly is just information architecture seemed like a really important area of study. For the most part, I kind of mimicked a lot of the layouts that I was seeing in some of these applications, but I would love to get a better understanding of how best to organize information in a way that is accessible, intuitive, and effective for learning. And then lastly, just alert your testers early that you'll need them. There were some cases where I was really scrambling to try to get a last piece of feedback or testing before submitting. And that's all. Thanks very much.